Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating practice, one that totally transforms how we process our weeks, our days, and honestly, our entire lives. We're drawing this directly from the writings of Salima, who authors a column dedicated to a concept she calls weekly receipts. So if you've ever felt like your days are just, endlessly blending together into one giant blur, this is absolutely for you. We're going to look at a highly structured, totally honest method to slow down and actually capture the real value of your own everyday experiences. Okay, let's dive into this with a quote that sets the absolute highest stakes possible. Socrates once famously stated, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Wow, it's a pretty heavy thought, right? But it hits the nail right on the head. It cuts directly to the core problem we all face today. We really have to ask ourselves, are we actually examining our lives, or are we just barely surviving them? For most of us, reality is just this fast-paced modern blur. Salima points out that we're usually moving way too fast to even notice what's actually happening to us. Think about your own last few weeks for a second. We have these brief conversations that leave us feeling, just a bit unsettled. We make small decisions we quietly regret. We might snap and say things we definitely didn't mean. And then what happens? Well, we just keep going. The week ends, a new one starts, and the whole cycle just repeats itself. Nothing really changes because that blur, it never stops. To see the real cost of this blur, let's actually look at a historical anecdote from Napoleon Hill's classic book, Think and Grow Rich. Let's look at Section 1, The 3-Foot Tragedy, a story from Napoleon Hill. This is the wild story of a guy named Darby. Darby was out digging for gold in Colorado, pouring his sweat, his time, and all his money into the earth. But eventually, the gold just seemed to dry up. Totally frustrated and defeated, Darby stopped digging. He straight up quit. He sold all of his heavy machinery and equipment for basically scrap metal and just walked away. But get this, the man who bought that scrap equipment did something incredibly smart. He brought in an expert engineer to assess the fault lines. They started digging again, and just 3 feet, literally exactly 3 feet from where Darby had stopped, they struck one of the richest gold deposits in the history of Colorado. Darby had quit just 3 feet away from massive, massive wealth. Which brings us to the next phase, the $1 million pivot, and finding the lesson. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how quitting that gold mine didn't completely ruin him. You'd think missing out on a historic fortune would absolutely destroy a person, right? But it actually set Darby up for a shocking pivot, creating a crystal clear contrast between 2 phases of his life. In phase 1, he experienced a colossal, undeniable failure. He totally gave up on the gold. But phase 2, that is where the magic happens. Darby didn't just bury his failure. He didn't try to sweep Colorado under the rug. Instead, he deeply analyzed it. He studied his own tendency to quit when things got tough. He practically forced himself to look right at his own missteps. And because he studied that failure, the scale of his resulting success was just staggering. Darby completely transitioned into selling life insurance, and he went on to sell over $1 million of life insurance every single year. Keep in mind, in that era, $1 million was a truly monumental sum of money. And he credited this insane success entirely to the fact that he learned one profound lesson from his failure in the dirt: never, ever stop just because you hit a tough spot. Napoleon Hill summarized Darby's triumph brilliantly. He noted that both successes and failures have their roots in simple experiences, but Darby actually analyzed them to find the lesson. He profited immensely, not by just blindly moving on to the next big thing, but by sitting in the intense discomfort of his massive failure. He picked it apart. He found the golden lesson. And most importantly, he allowed that lesson to fundamentally change how he operated in the world. This leads us to what we call the haunting question, the price of moving on. Bringing this historical lesson directly back to our own fast-paced lives, Napoleon Hill asks a question that Salima admits absolutely haunts her. What of the person who has neither the time nor the inclination to study failure? Just let that sink in for a second. If you don't have the time to look at your mistakes, how can you possibly find the knowledge that leads to success? This exact dilemma, our modern lack of time and, frankly, inclination to reflect, is the entire reason Salima's column even exists. We simply cannot afford to let our weeks just disappear into the ether. So, the crucial point is, we need a way out. Let's look at the weekly receipts solution: emptying your pockets. How do we actually fix this blur? Well, Salima defines weekly receipts as the absolute refusal to keep going without looking back. She uses this incredibly grounded, relatable analogy. It's exactly like going through your pockets after a long day.
Imagine coming home, emptying your pockets out onto the table, and just looking at what you've accumulated. The random lint, the crumpled up receipts, the loose change. You do the exact same thing with your week. You pull out all the messy moments, the uncomfortable conversations, the times you acted totally out of character. You look at it all honestly, and then you decide what lessons are actually worth keeping.
The mechanics of this are beautifully simple, yet, I'm not gonna lie, incredibly challenging. Step 1, stop and look back. You have to literally hit the pause button. Step 2, be completely honest. No excuses, no defensive little narratives we tell ourselves, just raw awareness of what actually happened. And step 3, find the lesson. This type of raw, unfiltered awareness is quite literally the only way to change your trajectory, improve your real-world results, and repair your relationships. Because without awareness, well, absolutely nothing changes. And this is exactly what Salima models in her writing. Her criteria for these weekly receipts are super strict. First, we're talking real stories from real days. This is not some curated Instagram highlight reel, okay? There is zero filtered performance here. Second, these are lessons you can actually use. It's not just abstract theory floating in the clouds. It's grounded in the messy, everyday reality of life. And third, she does it every single week without fail. She heavily emphasizes that this needs to become a strict ritual. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. Look, you do not have to sit down and deeply reflect on your life every single day. Honestly, that can get pretty overwhelming. But you absolutely owe it to yourself to do it weekly. You have to dig into who you were to become who you want to be. Just like Darby and the Gold Mine, you have to be willing to do the digging. Your own personal breakthroughs are waiting right there on the other side of your everyday messy moments, but only if you actually take the time to study them. So I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Think about your last 7 days. Go ahead and empty your mental pockets right now. Who were you this week? And much more importantly, taking those receipts into account, who do you want to be next week? Take the time to find your own golden lesson. Start your own weekly receipts. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy reflecting.